Hello, welcome to Pensions in 10 with me, David Brooks, and I'm not on my own. I've got Sadhbh Lynch here this week, and this time we take a look at the proposals to have multi-employer or unconnected multiple employer CDC arrangements, and we've got the inflation figures, so we talk through the implications for occupational and state pensions.
Okay, David, do you want to bring us through some of the updates in regulation to CDC?
Yeah, so the CDC collective defined contribution schemes, obviously still relatively new in the UK. So we've had one single employer CDC arrangement, that's the Royal Mail one, well, CDC with a bit of extra bits and bobs. And it's been obviously something the government are keen on, and they're keen on spreading it around so more employers can get involved. And one of the big issues with CDC arrangements, similar to sort of DB schemes and things like that, is you need a critical mass of employees to make it sort of worthwhile, either for the administration and for the pooling of the assets and everything else. You know, you're not going to get a 20-member CDC arrangement. You're going to need hundreds, possibly thousands, obviously thousands and thousands of people in them. And so Royal Mail, big employer, they've obviously got lots of people. But for smaller employers, they need to be able to join what they're now calling a UME, a unconnected multiple employer arrangement. So rather than being connected by some industry or anything else, unconnected employers could join together and join a CDC arrangement. Obviously, it won't be the employers necessarily clubbing together. It's going to be a commercial vehicle, a master trust type arrangement. And that's what the regulations are talking about. It's how we get from single employer or connected employer arrangements to these unconnected arrangements. And then from then on, technically speaking, it can go out into the mass market effectively then, that people can, in the same way that an employer looking at their remuneration strategy might pick a GPP or a master trust to provide their personal pension arrangement for their members, they could conceivably choose a CDC arrangement instead.
Yeah, I think it's good that they're looking at this as a possibility. Obviously, DB schemes, as we've known for a while, are on their kind of way out, and DC schemes are the only other alternative. So I like the fact that this kind of gives like an in-between halfway house where you still kind of get access to those different types of asset classes. You get the benefit of having lower fees because you're pooling different assets. And it's kind of, although it's not on the employer, going for those target different levels of income and that already being sorted for you can be quite a good step. So hopefully it will be something that is used, but I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite, I've described it actually as quite divisive, because you do get quite strong views either side. Some people think it's the answer to loads of the problems of the pension system that we have. You know, like you say, with the demise of DB, it's where the risk is with the employer, and then we go all the way to DC, where the risk and all the hassle was with the individual. Having something like this does seem to tick quite a few of those boxes. There are concerns around intergenerational fairness, because if you're an older member of a CDC arrangement, your benefits are going to be valued higher than a younger member, even though you might have been in it for exactly the same period of time and paid exactly the same contributions. You know, that's the way the liabilities are valued. Will people understand it? How will it go if benefits have to go down in any year? You know, that's going to be negative headlines. Now, again, it's been something I've said in the past around sort of political risk. If you have a CDC arrangement, let's say a number of well-performing employers are in there, but because of the market, the pensions are cut. You can see headlines in newspapers saying, employees of XYZ Limited see pensions drop while fat cats, and you can just see, that those kind of things do worry me a little bit. But I think I'm becoming a bit more of a CDC friend, I suppose. Mainly because it's sort of, I think it ticks off quite a few boxes of the sort of paternalism that, again, we lost with DB. You could join a DB scheme, pay your whatever percent a month, and you'll get a pension at the end of it. And I do still think fundamentally that's what people want. And I don't always like the modelling that kind of tries to oversell it, 60% better, in CDC than, DC. I just think that's overselling it. It's too much. I think it should be more discussed around the paternalism and the lack of faff, for want of a better phrase, for the member.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think if you think about a DC scheme, I guess because that's on the individual, it doesn't often get tied back to the company. But often if you're completely in control of your own pension and you have to make decisions, you have to look at the news, you might take out your pension at difficult times. And I think you have to be a lot more aware about what's going on within financial markets, even though a lot of people, obviously, that's not what their job was before they retired. So you almost have to become your own expert when you retire and constantly try and keep up to date with everything that's happening. And I think it can worry people who don't have background knowledge in that space, and they can often make decisions at difficult times, and it can lead to obviously worse outcomes. So hopefully it does lead to somewhat of a halfway house between both of them, but obviously risks and details to be figured out still.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, we'll have to see. So, I think the regulations coming to force July 2026. So that feels quite fast. So hopefully we'll see. I mean, the other thing I suppose, just a quick note, is I hope that we haven't missed the boat. Too many employers have gone, well, we're all in with DC now. That's it. We got rid of our DB scheme. Now we've got this DC arrangement. We're not revisiting our remuneration strategy again for something new. But you never know. You never know. We'll have to wait and see.
Thanks.
Okay, so as we know, September's inflation figure is out, and that's a big one for pension schemes. All sorts of benefits will be linked to that. So what's happening?
So the September inflation figure came out, it was 3.8%. So it kind of means different things for different types of pensions. So first of all, if we start off with occupational pensions, anything between 1997 and 2005, that's all subject to a 5% cap. So that 3.8% is underneath that cap, so they'll get that full 3.8%. And then anything accrued after 2005 is subject to a 2.5% cap, so they'll get that full 2.5% cap, but obviously less than the inflation figure. So that's occupational. Then state pensions, we have the triple lock. So we know inflation was 3.8%. Sorry, there's a lot of numbers. And then earnings increased by 4.8%, so that's higher. And then we also have that minimum 2.5%. So for state pensions, they'll actually be increasing by 4.8% this year. And what this kind of has indicated, and things that I've read in different places, there's obviously been a lot of volatility around earnings and inflation throughout the past few years, and often different figures can be volatile in different years. So this year, earnings is the highest for this triple lock, and it's at 4.8%. And I have seen some concerns, as I'm sure there always is some concerns, around the triple lock being too expensive, and whether they need to review it, that kind of thing. So I know there's some concern about whether it's sustainable to have this triple lock, but I think there always has been, and there always kind of will be. But those are the kind of overall figures that we've seen.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It does bring it to a head a little bit. And I was thinking while you were talking about, the volatility, I hadn't really thought about it that much. I know that ratchet effect comes through, and I'm sure it probably wasn't appreciated back in 20-something or other when it came in. I can't remember when triple lock came in. I want to say 2010 or something like that, but it's been a long time now. And it wasn't 2010. I can't remember what it was. But I don't think that is expected that we would go through things like COVID, where earnings were very, did fluctuate, obviously because people were on furlough and all the, the figures went all around, then inflation just went through the roof, and then now earnings are now coming back through after having a period of high inflation. And it just feels like that ratcheting effect is now just becoming stronger and stronger. And I think you were looking at some OBR, modelling from when it first was considered and now.
Yeah, so I think we see, because inflation obviously comes into effect straight away, often that can take a time for that to be reflected in earnings. So one year it might be based on inflation, the next year it might be based on earnings, especially because we're in a very volatile time. So the OBR, when I was looking at it, said that initially they were expecting to spend about 5 billion annually on this triple lock. And by 2029, 2030, so the kind of end of this decade, they're thinking it's going to be 3 times higher. So I think even that estimate only being a few years away kind of amplifies, will it be too much of a burden for the state to continue this triple lock? As I think by then, if it was to reach that figure, it would be 1.5% of GDP, so the whole of the UK's earnings, which obviously is a lot. So it's difficult.
Yeah, no, that's true. Okay, thank you.
I hope everyone enjoyed this week's podcast. Please make sure you tune in next week with Dave, and thank you for listening.